Good morning. This is Elaine Balbrecht again. Welcome to the webinar for the Housing Trust Fund Rental Assistance Due Diligence Training. Minnesota Housing's mission is to provide access to safe, decent, affordable housing and to build stronger communities across the state by offering products and services to help Minnesotans buy and fix up their homes and stabilize neighborhoods, communities, and families. Minnesota Housing also supports the development and preservation of affordable rental housing through both financing and long-term asset management. The agency has also pioneered a successful model for supportive housing that helps stabilize the lives of some of the state's most vulnerable citizens. Congratulations on your selection as a grantee of the Housing Trust Fund Rental Assistance Program. We received over $24 million in requests for $23 million in available funds. We were able to fund all applicants, but since both the rental assistance and the housing navigation funding exceeded the available funding, you may find that you were not funded to the extent of your request. We appreciate your attendance at this required due diligence training. I'm Elaine Balbrecht. I'm the program manager for the Housing Trust Fund Rental Assistance Program. Kim Bailey, the Housing Stability Contract Manager, and I will be presenting today on the due diligence requirements for your grant. First, Kim will present the information on the general due diligence items required for all programs, and then I will discuss the due diligence requirements specific to this program. We will outline the submission process and the deadlines, and then we'll take your questions.
Good morning, everybody. This is Kim Bailey, Contracts Manager with the Housing Stability Team. I just want to take a minute before I get started to introduce a newer member to our team. Meredith, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Meredith Marion. I joined the team a few months ago and will be a main contact for you with due diligence questions. I've had the chance to interact with a number of you already, and I look forward to working with you moving forward.
As a kind of side note too, there will probably be other interactions as we move through the grant life cycle for you to work with Meredith. When we get into some of the monitoring and reporting, Meredith will be reaching out to folks around things like that as well. So we wanted to just have an opportunity to make sure you knew Meredith's voice. So if you're calling in and asking questions, that it's a familiar voice to everybody. Moving into the due diligence that's required for all the grants through our Housing Stability Team. We'll talk specifically about each one of these, the grant contract that was sent to you and how that needs to be returned, the certificate of good standing, a board resolution from your organization, proof of insurance, and then if you are a new grantee or have banking changes, the electronic funds transfer form. For the grant contract, you have to submit 2 original signed grant contracts. So we cannot accept a PDF. So if you sign in PDF a copy, you know, that can be nice for us to know that it's been signed, but we can't use that version to actually execute the contract. We need kind of what's called in finger quotes a wet signature. So we ask that you submit 2 original contracts. We'll keep one. We'll send one back to you. We have, as soon as the contracts are executed, excuse me, we'll email you a copy so that you know it's been signed, and then you'll also receive a hard copy in the mail. I do encourage you to read through your entire contract and all the exhibits, both for accuracy, but there have been some changes since the last grant cycle to the requirements in the contract. So I would really encourage everybody to read through it, make sure that you understand what you're being held accountable for contractually. Both there's requirements around grantee meeting attendance, subcontracting, things that have been added this year that will be new. If you have questions about your contract or something is not accurate in there and needs to be changed, authorized rep, we made a mistake in an address, something like that, reach out to me and we can get that changed, and we'll send you a new contract to sign before submitting to us. The certificate of good standing, this item is only required for non-governmental organizations, so nonprofits, if you are a HRA, public housing authority, have those sort of distinctions. This is not an item that you'll need to submit. For non-government entities, we do require either a current certificate of good standing or a screenshot. So don't feel that you have to go out and pay the additional cost to get the official certificate. A screenshot of your current standing will work. It has to show all of the business record details, everything above the filing history. So for those of you, we do have a link on here for the Secretary of State's website. Those of you who have been on there will see there's kind of a cutoff where it talks about when you first filed to be an organization and all the kind of upkeep. That's the filing history. We don't need that information, but we do need to have everything above that. The renewal due date, because you're standing with the state basically to do business, has an expiration date where you need to refile and pay a fee. That renewal date has to be after the start of the grant term. So it needs to fall sometime after that October 1 grant date. Board resolution, this is the document that you will obtain from your organization's board of directors. Or other kind of governing body for your organization. It needs to be signed, it needs to be dated, it needs to also be specific to the grant, so it should reference the Housing Trust Fund and the amount that you were awarded. And then most importantly, it has to include who's authorized to sign the contract. So often we will receive a board resolution and it'll say, you know, as an organization, we accept this, you know, program for this dollar amount, but then it doesn't list who can actually sign the contract for your agency. And that's a really important piece. We will only execute a contract by those, if the contract is signed by the person listed in the board resolution. Many organizations have multiple people that can sign, and that's fine. You know, if it's your president, vice president, or CFO, or you know, whoever can sign. Just make sure that the person that actually is signing the contract matches the person in your resolution. Proof of insurance. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. This seems to be the due diligence item that gives people kind of the most heartache when submitting their items to us, and really wanting to talk about a few things that'll make things easier when you're submitting. As far as the basic requirements for insurance, we require that you have employee dishonesty in the amount of 1/8 of your total grant award. If you notice on the slide, there's kind of this employee dishonesty / crime coverage, and the reason crime is noted is that sometimes employee dishonesty is not a standalone policy, but rather an endorsement or a declaration under your crime policy. So if you have crime that includes employee dishonesty and that's what's submitted to us, that will be fine, but we do require employee dishonesty. One of the items that often gets submitted to us is employee theft, and we cannot accept employee theft coverage. Many insurance companies will tell you that they are interchangeable terms. However, they're really not. Employee theft usually only covers theft and forgery coverage, where employee dishonesty covers kind of any fraudulent or dishonest act by an employee, contractor, and its like. So really making sure that when you submit that certificate of liability, that it includes and lists either employee dishonesty or crime coverage, and that it shows that 1/8 of your grant amount or above. Minnesota Housing needs to be listed as the certificate holder. and the policy needs to have an expiration date that's beyond that October 1 start period. The other thing is making sure that our address is correct. We've seen some insurance companies submit a certificate of liability that still has our old location. We will ask that you go back and correct that. So making sure, again, that it's employee dishonesty or crime, it's 1/8 the amount, it's on an actual certificate of liability and not a certificate of property insurance. It's not you submitting a copy of your policy or some letter from the insurance company, but that it's actually a certificate of liability with Minnesota Housing listed with our correct address. And then lastly, an electronic funds transfer form is required if you want money deposited into another account, you're new to the agency or the program and haven't had one of these completed. So this basically allows for us to direct deposit funds into your account. So it's working with the Minnesota Management and Budget Office. We have links on here. It'll walk you through what you need to do, what form you need to complete, and how you turn that in. But this will be the only way that you can get paid. If you are also new to the organization and have never received grant money from us before, we will also request that a W-9 be completed as well. Back to you, Elaine.
Thank you. We'll mute for just a moment. Hi, this is Elaine Back. I will cover the program-specific due diligence for the Housing Trust Fund program. The first item on here is the Housing Trust Fund program summary. This is Exhibit B, and that will define your program and the things that are specific about it. You'll see that it's a fillable form that you can fill out, whereas in the past, Minnesota Housing used to complete that for you. Now you can complete that. The next item is the Housing Navigation Work Plan for those of you that applied and were awarded Housing Navigation funds. That will be Exhibit C if you were awarded Housing Navigation funds. Just a quick note that for those of you were awarded the funds, that would be Exhibit C, and insurance requirements will be Exhibit D. If you were not funded for housing navigation activities, the insurance requirements will be Exhibit C of your contract. The next item will be the Memorandum of Understanding, or the MOU, or other contractual agreement if the primary service provider is an agency other than the grantee. On the Housing Trust Fund program summary, complete all the fields and submit for approval through the submittal process. We will review the program summary and may request changes or approve the document as submitted. When complete, this will be Exhibit B to the contract. You may notice that this exhibit is shorter than in previous grant terms. And this is because some of the information is captured within the contract itself or in the RFP application, which is included as part of your contract. On the program summary, you see a development number, or the D number, and an MRA number, which is the application number for this current grant, which is a specific number assigned to this contract funding for our system. These are the references for the rental assistance draw requests that ensure funds are drawn from the correct allocation. If you received housing navigation funds, you will see next that these funds have a different MRA number to separate the funds. For those of you that combined more than one grant into this new grant application and your grants had multiple D numbers in the past, we have chosen one of these D numbers for this grant contract. Next is the Housing Navigation Work Plan and Budget. $250,000 in funding for housing navigation services was offered in this year's RFP, and over $450,000 in requests were received. Due to the high response, we may not have been able to fully fund your request. So we understand that this may affect your proposed housing navigation activities. Use the plan to outline which of the eligible activities you will perform and complete the budget template with your projected expenditures. When these items are complete, submit them per the submittal instructions. We will review your proposed activities and expenditures and make changes or approve the documents as submitted. When complete, these items will be Exhibit C to your contract. While all due diligence items are due by 4:30 p.m. on September 13th, please submit this exhibit as soon as possible. In the event revisions are required to avoid any delays in executing your contract. Next, the Memorandum of Understanding. As I explained, if the primary service provider is not the grantee, submit a current executed Memorandum of Understanding clearly describing the responsibilities of each entity in effect through the term of the contract. If any of the rental administration work for your grant is subcontracted, please contact Kim Bailey or me for further instructions. Next, I'm going to turn it back to Kim for information on submission and deadlines.
So new this biennium with this grant term as well, we have kind of one place for all due diligence to be submitted to. It's the mhfa.grants email address listed on your screen. It was also on your due diligence checklist that was submitted with your selection letter. We're using this as kind of one-stop shopping for all of our due diligence for the multiple grant programs within the Housing Stability Team. Because of that, we ask that you use some naming conventions when you submit your items. So in the email, we ask that you list the program name and your grantee name. So for instance, Housing Trust Fund, and then the grantee, like Clay County HRA, for example, and that you name all of the documents within that email by your name and the due diligence items. So for instance, Clay County HRA board resolution, just as a way for Meredith when she's taking in, if you just understand the volume of documents that are flowing in, that we just can kind of keep things a little more organized. All of the general items can be submitted as a PDF. So when you're submitting a board resolution, your insurance forms, those kinds of things can be submitted in PDF. Your program-specific items need to be submitted in their original format. So for instance, the program summary or the housing navigation work plan should be submitted in the Word doc. That way, when we're reviewing it, if there are changes that we have or questions, we can use track changes and submit that back to you in a more precise way. Again, the contract needs to either be mailed or hand delivered. That can't be submitted electronically. As far as the deadline, all items have to be received and approved prior to us executing the contract. So again, if we have everything but one of the items, say your insurance, we have to wait before we can sign, which also means that you can't spend funds until after the contract has been executed. So despite the fact that the contract start date is October 1st, if all due diligence hasn't been submitted and we're unable to execute until, say, October 10th, all expenses between the end of the prior contract and October 10th cannot be reimbursed. So again, the deadline for submission is really important because we will not reimburse any expenses that are incurred prior to the contract starting. All items, as Elaine mentioned earlier, are due by 4:30 on September 13th. And questions regarding a specific due diligence item can be directed to Meredith. Her email and phone number are listed on here. She's been a great help, so please reach out and allow her to help you through the process as needed. She's also the staff person who is regularly checking that MHFA.grants website. So when you're communicating through that, you'll be dealing with Meredith primarily. We now want to allow opportunity for questions. Because we have a larger group, I don't think we're going to unmute phones. We'd ask that you type in your question, and Elaine and I will do our best to answer those.
While we're waiting, I just wanted to note a couple of things. One is that you may have noticed on the instructions for the RFP that we said that the due diligence was due on September 6th, and but we have moved this out 1 week to September 13th, as Kim said, in order to provide you more time to complete the due diligence items if needed. We also encourage you to submit other individual items, including the housing navigation, work plan, and budget, as they are completed. You do not need to submit all the items at the same time. Just be sure to name the individual items as requested on the previous slide. You can also submit the signed contract before the other due diligence items are submitted. Just know that we won't sign the contract until all the other due diligence items are received and approved.
We had one question about whether or not this presentation will be available, and it will. It will be posted hopefully later this week to the Housing Trust Fund website page. So the PowerPoint will be available as well as the actual presentation itself. Other questions about either general due diligence, program specific? I know that the program summary and the work plan and budget form, those are kind of new this year and how that's working as far as the negotiation back and forth and you having a role in completing that. We have a question about knowing that HMIS is a requirement for this funding. For grantees that have combined grants this biennium, will guidance be provided on how HMIS should be set up to meet program requirements?
This is Elaine, and yes, we will be providing guidance on that. I don't have it as part of this presentation, but we will send that out to those of you that have consolidated grants, and we'll also be providing guidance to a few folks that are changing their programs who did not report in HMIS previously.
And obviously that will require you working with ICA to either get set up in HMIS or how your kind of provider tree is set up, and that for those combined programs that might actually be setting up kind of a parent and then all of the programs underneath it kind of as children, for those of you who know HMIS speak. But we want to make sure that that's really mindful and well determined before we provide additional instructions. So as Elaine mentioned, more to come. But again, you know, if you have questions as things come up, you can always reach out to Meredith, myself, or Elaine. We're available to help you through this contracting process. You know, we want to make sure that questions get answered and that people know what they need to do so we can get contracts executed in a timely manner.
Well, we all want to thank you for attending the webinar, and as Kim noted, it will be posted on the Housing Trust Fund Rental Assistance webpage within a few days. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with questions you have as you complete the due diligence items. Thank you.